Much for making the time to join us. Now, you've outlined those two issues that seem to impact on South Africa quite significantly, that being twin deficits as well as a vulnerability to Fed tapering. Where do you put sovereigns of this nature in terms of a forecast for 2014?
Well, I mean, South Africa is in a slightly different position from the other countries in the region. On the positive side, South Africa is used to dealing with volatility of portfolio flows. And in fact, we see a recovery in growth largely due to the improvement in Europe. So, but as you say, South Africa is very much one of the countries that may be affected by Fed tapering. But the other countries that are likely to be affected, so Ghana is one, Kenya is another. They are less used to dealing with this sort of volatility, and so that's where we have more concerns as to how policymakers may react and, the ultimate impact on these countries.
Of course, Richard, looking at the fact that there have been 16 ratings in the region in this year, how does the balance between positive and negative ratings fare? And were there any surprises from the ratings that were undertaken in the year?
Yes, we now have 16 ratings in the region. We've now got a bigger balance of positive outlooks over negative outlooks, but we still characterize the overall outlook for the region as stable. The positive outlooks now are in some of the smaller countries, so Uganda, Seychelles. The negative outlooks are fewer and further between. Cape Verde is one. But I think the interesting thing is that the three big downgrade stories this year, that was South Africa back in January, Ghana, and most recently Zambia, they're still, they all have stable rating outlooks, but things are still tending to weaken. It's most gradual of all in South Africa, I guess. But Ghana, for example, they have double-digit twin deficits, which double the size of those in South Africa, and only recently have begun attracting large amounts of foreign portfolio capital. So that's probably top of our list of concerns in the event of significant withdrawal of portfolio money out of emerging markets. Zambia is less exposed to that sort of concern, but I mean its downgrade most recently was because there was a very negative surprise on the fiscal outturns, because they've been spending more money on current spending than they budgeted, and that unfortunately looks as if it will continue next year.
Richard, what are the big external factors that the agency is going to be looking at as the new year kicks off that are likely to have an impact on how some of these sovereigns are going to be rated in the coming year?
Well, I mean, the external environment, obviously it's been fairly challenging in this year, and it's now closing with talk of Fed tapering back in May. In effect, it closed the markets for 6 weeks or so, but it was Nigeria, interestingly, which came back and issued in July. It was the first country to borrow, to issue a Eurobond after that hiatus back in May, June. So that's a positive story in that, a Sub-Saharan African country can actually be the first to issue after a period of turbulence. But, the global outlook is improving gradually. And as I say, Europe, the upturn in Europe is certainly going to benefit Africa in general. I guess the big concern that we had a year ago, which was of a hard landing in China, is now less of a concern, and obviously China has become very important for many Sub-Saharan African countries, not only as an export market, but also because of its impact on commodity prices. So that's less of a concern than it was. So the Fed tapering issue and how big is that how big a reaction are we going to see when that actually happens, rather than is just being talked about. That really is the biggest unknown for the year ahead. But then there are these homegrown risks of which have tended to be weak fiscal policy. Ghana and Zambia are two good examples of that.
Richard,
and then I guess there's political risks rising in Nigeria. That would be the other concern.
Right, Richard, just to jump in there, of course, as you pick up on the political risk in Nigeria, there obviously are some domestic factors that the agency is going to be looking at. In addition to fiscal policy overall, do you harbor any concerns about the upcoming elections, particularly in South Africa, Namibia and Mozambique?
Not really. I think in South Africa, obviously, we're going to be seeing what implication, if any, the elections and the new cabinet might have on the prospects for structural reform, which is what would help South Africa raise its potential growth story. At the moment, as I say, we're expecting growth in South Africa to increase in 2014, but that's largely on the back of the improving global outlook. There are things that South Africa needs to do domestically on the structural reform side, which would also help invigorate the growth outlook.
And of course, the history of rating improvements in the Sub-Saharan African region has been rather slow in the past. Are you expecting us to turn the tide on this in the near future?
No, I think the thing is that however dynamic some of these countries might be, and some of these countries are growing at 7% per annum or more. Rwanda is one example of that, but they still that still doesn't lift their per capita income significantly above their peer group, and there are things that on governance to sort out. And the sort of financial market development. So things, the sort of structural reforms, which take a long time. They're difficult to pass in the first place, and they take a long time to actually have an impact. So that largely explains why we haven't seen any countries like Brazil, Turkey, India, which have gone all the way up from single B into investment grade. That, I'm afraid, is still some way off for Sub-Saharan Africa.
Richard, thank you so much for joining us on the line. Of course, that was Richard Fox, Senior Director at Fitch Ratings. Now, American civil rights leader Jesse Jackson says it's time for South Africa to wipe out economic inequality. Jackson says the lives of millions of South Africans who still live in poverty need to be uplifted. He says we owe this legacy to Nelson Mandela. Jackson was speaking in Johannesburg, and Vaneshri Govender has more.
The Nelson Mandela Centre for Memory has been a central gathering point for South Africans and foreigners seeking to remember the father of the nation. The Houghton facility is a big attraction in Johannesburg. It documents various stages of his life from political prisoner to president. Here, visitors can see old photographs, newspaper articles, and even Madiba's handwritten notes. Since his passing, thousands have visited to write in books of condolence and reflect upon the life and